Thank you all for being here. Look at how attentive you are. Nice to see you all. And it's still sunny outside too.
Am I hooked up? Can you hear me? Is that good? Okay.
Everyone here, Zoe?
Okay. I'll get on this wobbly chair and try and feel comfortable.
So we're actually welcoming Zoe back to the gallery. Some of you might recognize the first few slides that we're showing here from 2016. She was part of a group exhibition called All Membranes Are Porous, and it was work that focused on the body, which is something that Zoe's still exploring. So I'm just going to dive right in here. So that work and a lot of the slides that you're going to see at first here are showing how your practice was more socially based. For example, you would engage with communities and have participants engage with your ceramic objects, as you can see. So this exhibition you have been working on for a very long time, and it's specific to our space here, and it represents a real departure for you from a socially based practice to this ritualized studio practice and the private space of your studio. And it's a ritualized practice that's informed by politicized somatics. And so can you talk about first the shift away from working from the social body to the felt body, and just describe your methodology of working through the body?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to refer to my notes as well as being able to gaze out and see all your beautiful faces. Yeah, for many years I was doing projects that were much more like large scale, working with a lot of collaboration and also with community members. And I found that I was like really craving a depth in my work that I wasn't able to do with a general public. There was something else I was craving, and so I started to realize that I needed to create some types of rituals for myself so that I could do that kind of work on my own in my studio. And yeah, I guess I was thinking about this reality of like, if I'm looking for a different outcome, I need to have a different path. So that's what I started trying to develop, different kinds of ways of working. So I started looking into, I started researching and working with folks who had like somatic and embodiment practices, people working in massage and craniosacral therapy and somatic therapy, like looking to these different kinds of modalities, as well as researching and trying to understand like my own ancestors' practices, and like just trying to ground in different kind of learnings. And then I was like enriching my studio practice with that.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to describe, I've been finding. And so when you go into the gallery, if you go to the back corridor, there's videos there where you actually can see Zoe in her studio, and I think that explains it quite better than words do in a way. Because your way of making paintings is unconventional. And you talk about being guided by bodily sensations and impulses to make marks, using the dimensions of your body to make your paintings. And you've also talked about how North American culture doesn't value the body's wisdom as reliable. And it preferences intellect over sensation or emotion. So you've done a lot of personal work in that kind of retreat to the studio. And I would say it's, your paintings are internally driven rather than driven by external forces. So when you enter, you'll have a feeling, hopefully, of kind of entering cave-like spaces and arches. And you've talked about this connecting to ancient ways of being. And this unlearning that you just mentioned, unlearning entrenched systems of our dominant culture, and this seeking kind of connections that you've said reach backwards and forwards at the same time. Can you talk about that a bit more? Mm-hmm. The caves.
The caves, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna look at my notes. There was a lot of things to pick up on there.
I know. I've been kind of dying to talk to you about all this.
Okay, so. Okay. Well, we could have a more private setting if you want to talk about things as well. Yeah, I guess like I've been thinking about my experience of like moving through university and how that was like a space where that was very academically and intellectually driven, and I approached art from a place that was like much more embodied and like much more, for me it was like obvious that there was like a spiritual and emotional connection, and I found that that was so strange that that wasn't available. Mm-hmm. And so I started, my interest in art making is like connected with social change. So I was like, okay, I actually need to, well, I think there's this really great quote by an activist, Grace Lee Boggs, which is transform yourself to transform the world. So I really like took that to heart in my own practice. Mm-hmm. Something I could say about the caves, and well, I think actually today when I was sitting in the gallery, it's something funny, but when you make a bunch of work and then you actually get to install it somewhere, you arrive to it in a totally different way. And for me, I had this experience of like moving like through these archways, like having some kind of like really intentional entrance, and arriving into this main space. It felt today kind of like the architecture and the sense of being in the middle of that space felt like a kind of a new city, or like a plaza, or like a town square where people could gather, and that this would be like a different kind of place. And for me that like felt exciting because it was like it's reminiscent of the architecture that comes from my Western European history of like these archways and these arcades, but yet the architecture is like soft and malleable and like changeable, and it's been like sewn up in this direction, but like could be taken down, and could be destroyed, could be made into something else, like could have another reality. Mm-hmm. Like could be packed up and made into another reality, which felt exciting for me to like, that I could feel that in the space.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about these caves kind of being like burrowing into layers as well.
Yeah, I think that's also like using all of these like sheer layers, like thinking about it as veils, and like, and also like moving through these as like an opportunity to be able to like arrive as yourself in a different way in a public space. Mm-hmm. That you could have some like privacy behind some of these veils and these layers, but that also you, if you wished, could like unmask and arrive there in a different way.
Yeah, I think this might be the first time we have a hammock in the gallery, which you're all welcome to lie in.
One at a time.
Yeah, shoes off preferably. It's really an invitation to rest. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an experience that you're creating, mm-hmm. an immersive experience. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A big motivation for me in bringing your work here is at this particular time, I'm sure we can all relate this, with the pandemic and the climate crisis. I could go on, the effects of colonization, which Johnny and Craig will speak about. It feels like there's a collective desire for healing right now. Knowing your work for so long and knowing what you've been working on in the studio and this ritualist practice and working through the body, You identified in another talk some questions that you ask yourself in the studio. Is there a difference in artwork that comes from a felt place? And can the potency of the object made through studio ritual resonate with the viewer? And this practice of politicized somatics, I think, many of us can relate to the idea of being mindfulness, feeling sensations in your body. Politicized somatics is pushing it into this sort of enacting cultural transformation. So can you, we also have this guide that you're welcome to take as soon as you enter the space. And one of the offerings there is that you say, we are using our bodies to model new possibilities. So can you talk about this larger potential for healing and transformation that you're hoping for?
Yeah, no pressure. It's very slow personal work.
Yeah,
I think it's about numbness. I think that we live in a society that is perpetuating numbness. So, and so I'm interested in like trying to unlearn that. Yeah, that numbness and that sort of like shame and dissociation that's like a foundation of that. And yeah, I really like if folks have time to spend in the very back of the gallery. There's a really beautiful resource area that's been built with books, which is like a kind of dream library for me of like folks that I've learned from around these ideas. So I would offer that really, really rich teachings. Yeah.
So one thing you notice right away in what you're wearing and the work that you've made is this like color and texture and like this felt sensation. And you're drawing on the work of artists like the 19th century painter and mystic Hilma af Klint, who you should all look up after this. She talks about an assertion of living, and you've called it this, or I think this is your terminology, body, spirit, felt aesthetics. So what's the connection that you're making between beauty and spirit through your work?
Yeah, I see these as entwined. And there's a writer and thinker who I really adore, Adrienne Marie Brown. And she speaks about in her book, Emergent Strategy, this idea that spirit speaks through aesthetic. And I just like, I love this idea that it's like, it's not neutral. Like how artists are training themselves to like work with aesthetics. It's something that's really, it's like a power, it's really tangible. And I think it has like the potential to like connect, when you can tap into that, to connect with yourself, connect with other people, to connect with the collective. I think there's like a potency and a potential there that I think has been historically really dismissed. And I think it's also why art and artists are like always fighting to have validation within society, because I think that has been dismissed. And I think artists dismiss themselves for that as well, that it's somehow like frivolous or something like that. So I think there's like an alchemy that can happen within the art making that I believe and I think it's can be like transferred and into the physical artworks that others. I mean, I've experienced that with other artworks of folks who I've never met or who have long died. Like there's a potency still there.
Yeah, the feeling of awe. Yeah. So. We'll wrap up so Johnny and Craig can talk next. Do you want to just mention anything about the performance? We're going to have Zoe will be performing with 2 other women June 16th and 17th as a kind of enactment in the space.
Yeah, you can see in one of the videos that's over by the hammock is a video documentation of a performance that I did with one of the performers. So often I work with performers to like activate and use these, like building a space, building the artwork into a space, and then like using that as some kind of stage or setting for something else to occur. So yeah, it would be really beautiful for people to come for that. I just wanted to thank Johnny for your exhibition. It's really powerful, and I'm really grateful that I got to meet you and experience the work. Thank you.
Thanks.